floor, the 14th floor, was top of the town. And it was definitely kind of we just passed one highbrow spot, the Senator Hotel. This was an even higher highbrow spot, definitely aiming at the Chamber of Commerce crowd. After Helen Tweedy had kind of earned her chops at Buddy Bear's, she became the featured attraction at top of the town. And in the late 1940s, they advertised the latest high-tech gadgets in the club in order to bring in customers like television, so you can watch the baseball game from the top of the town bar, as well as live music and a dining room. And then one thing about music is that it mutates. It evolves over time. And so jazz went from being kind of a derivative of New Orleans black music to the popular swing music with these huge bands. You have 10, 12, 20 musicians all at once. And then in the 40s, it evolves into bop. You start having smaller and smaller groups and smaller clubs. And then the format of a drummer, a singer, a guitarist, a bass player became the basis for rock and roll. And rock and roll as a musical form is definitely an interracial product. Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, who came to Sacramento in the late 1940s, they opened a club called Wills Point out in the suburbs, where they also used to play here at the Sacramento Hotel. Bob Wills said that the place where he learned music was listening to field workers in East Texas, listening to African American music. He incorporated that into his sound, and his song "Ida Red" became part of the inspiration for Maybelline by Chuck Berry. This is passed back and forth, and his younger brother, Billy Jack Wills, 20 years younger, but asked to stay in Sacramento to be the house band, and his Western Swing Band were a mutation between jazz and more the traditional country and Western music that became essentially rockabilly. And rock and roll became a fusion of the African-American jazz cat and the hillbilly cat, of which Elvis was kind of the popularizing public persona. And that one other thing about this corner, in addition to its jazz history, is this corner has massive significance for its rock and roll history. Right behind us, above the Country Made restaurant, was the broadcast studio for Croy Radio, kind of more of a pop station. And then down the street, we were talking about some of the bop jazz in the 40s and 50s, where Stan Lunetta, this is where the house bands played How Much Was That Dog in the Window. This is where people did strange and wonderful things to small drunken crowds in the middle of the night. Stan and I think a piano player, a drummer by the name of Stormy Sex, and touring acts like Miss Wiggles, who was a contortionist, who would come on stage with a wicker chair and wearing a leotard, stand on her head on the chair, and then vibrate and gyrate various parts of her anatomy to the tune of Night Train or whatever the band was playing. And he told me about this act. Yeah, it sounded great, and it turned out they actually, Miss Wiggles, her name was Velma Adkerson, and she passed away in 2012, but she was still performing her act until she was in her 80s.
And on her head?
Standing on her head. And it was all it's one of the Gone clubs, and actually right in front here, this was the Native Sons Hall, another rock and roll venue where people like a young Janis Joplin used to come through and play. And then back to the heights of the top of the Elks building in 1968, that became the launch pad for the first KZAP Sacramento freeform radio station. And supposedly you can see, you can't really see it from here, but there's around the side there's a fire escape, which is supposedly where the DJs used to go even higher if you acquire my drift. Another one of the lost landmarks, just lost in a fire this past year. People may remember it as the Broiler, but right in that gap between the two buildings, that was a club known as the Tropics. Sacramento's first tiki bar, opened by a Portuguese immigrant named John Quaresma, better known as Johnny Christmas. His house band was Gabriel Silveira and his band, another Portuguese immigrant. And if any of you have seen the 1949 photo of the opening of the Crest Theater around the corner, that is Gabriel Silveira's band playing in front. And Gabe was more than just a musician. He also was very civic-minded. Like I said, he was part of Sacramento's Portuguese community, as was Johnny Christmas. And he ran for city council on a Move I-5 campaign because Interstate 5 was going to go right, well, where it is now, through the heart of Sacramento's Portuguese community and wiping out the last bit of the West End. Unfortunately, Mr. Silvera didn't win the election. He was a better musician than a politician, and I-5 ended up where it was. We're going to continue around the corner and hang a left at 10th Street.